Welcome to ELF at Mitchell Elementary, Designs of Nature. This is Leaves and Cones, Center 3. As always with our outlines, we have them taped on the top of our lid for our centers. This Center 3 is about pine cone patterns. So we're going to learn about pine cones kind of in depth and that they're, what the related patterns are in nature. For this center, volunteers need to bring in closed pine cones if they can find them, but we do have extras. But you also need to bring in pineapples or flower petals with Fibonacci number, apple, banana, etc., and maybe a branch with pine needles in clusters of 2, 3, or 5. And we'll cover that in this section, Mathematical Patterns in Nature. But once you have that information ready, we'll show you the materials that are with this center. They will all come in the Center 3 bin, and again, here is an extra ELF supplies bin, which will have cones for dissection. These cones over here, which will be in the case, we do not want to dissect. These are special cones, but they can definitely see the variety and shape of cones. So this giant one, this really pokey one, some spruce cones, although there are some to dissect in there, and this pretty cool Douglas fir cone. We just want to give the kids a little bit of a variety of cones. So these cones are for observation only, but they can use the magnifying glasses and take a peek. And again, we have extra cones here. So at the beginning of your ELF day, or maybe a couple hours before ELF, you might come to this extra bin and get a cone that might look like this, or partially open like that. And you want to soak these in water so that they close nice and tight for part of our study later. When cones are soaked in water, they close up tight to protect the seeds as they travel downstream or in a lake. So the first part of the study is going to be probably with these paper materials. And this one is cones and cone counting. Please be sure and always put the materials back where you found them for the next class to run smoothly. This handout just shows kind of some variety of cones. And I would show this paper material probably before you show the actual cones, because kids get pretty excited with the actual things to touch. And again, if you have time to go out and look for some different species in your own yards or at the parks of golden, that'd be great to bring in some to share. So as the cone has closed with this, you're going to study a little bit more of the spiral shape of cones. And this diagram shows a couple ways to do it from a tightly closed cone. And it tells you here how you can count the pine cone spirals. This also shows a different diagram for pine cone counting and talks about trees with cones and kind of shows a little bit of the seed structure so that when you're dissecting you can try to take a cone apart and look for the seeds in there. In our example cone, they are in there and they look a little bit like papery, and these are ones that are pretty dry to get out. But inside there is paper bits, and you should be able to find the seeds in there if the squirrels haven't eaten them all. My example doesn't have a very good seed, but it does have the flap that the seeds go on. Okay, so for the cones, once they're tightly closed, this one isn't the best example to show you, but you can see the spiral pattern. So instead of yarn, we have pipe cleaners, and we just want to demonstrate to the kids, you'd start at the bottom and show they can lay a pipe cleaner and kind of trace around the spiral. And the spiral pattern is to maximize the efficiency of the seeds and protect them as best as possible in this tight woven pattern. So they could use a couple pipe cleaners if you wanted to have them demonstrate that. And the older kids could count the number of spirals from the bottom of a cone. This one isn't a good example because it's broken. But as we can see in our pictures, you can count the spirals. This has 8 spirals, and that we'll learn more about in just a minute with the Fibonacci numbers. So on to the Fibonacci numbers. This is Mathematical Patterns in Nature on the outline. And we have a separate envelope with all our Fibonacci stuff. Fibonacci is a fancy scientist from the year 1202, so he's been around a while. We'll have this binded for you to look at, this whole Fibonacci numbers article. We highlighted some interesting things in this section. He was a mathematician that studied and started studying with how fast rabbits would breed in ideal circumstances. And he found out that there was a series of numbers formed. So it was 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8 for Fibonacci. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. And to get the Fibonacci, we add the 2 prior numbers. 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 plus 3 is 5. 5 plus 3 is 8. 8 plus 5 is 13. And the reason this pattern is important is because in nature we find it repeating all over the place. So Fibonacci numbers in plants. If the leaves are arranged in a Fibonacci sequence, the leaves, it maximizes the sunlight for the leaves. And it's one estimate that 90% of all plants exhibit this pattern of leaves involving the Fibonacci numbers. So it is an important thing for nature. Here's a picture of the spiral pattern, again, that we talked about with the pine cones. You can also find it in pineapple, artichokes, other fruits and vegetables. And Fibonacci fingers was even a question. If you look at your own hand, you have two hands, which is a Fibonacci number, 5 fingers, which is a Fibonacci number, 3 parts, Fibonacci, and 2 knuckles, Fibonacci. Then it goes on to disprove, because science always has a little bit of disproving to be done. And here's some things that don't have, 4 is not a Fibonacci number. Neither is 6, but some people would argue that 6 is 2 Fibonacci numbers. Anyways, this Fibonacci talk might be best for 3rd and 4th graders, but it's also very interesting just to note the patterns and talk about the information in this packet. And spiral patterns is also a part of Fibonacci. So once you cover that, there's another handout in here about Fibonacci numbers. And with the bigger kids, we have a poster that they can work on. Each number in the sequence is the sum of the previous numbers of the sequence, so you can help them try and figure out. And there's a dry erase spot to make the Fibonacci sequence. Down here on the bottom we have it, although it should say 1, 2 ones, but 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, blah, 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 all the way, and it's, again, the prior 2 numbers. So 144 plus 233 is 377. 377 plus 233 is 610. Anyways, it's just a kind of a cool mathematical formulation for most things found in nature. To drive that point home, you want to go and look for samples in your garden and the grocery store of Fibonacci found in nature. So I went out and gathered a few flowers. If we counted the petals of this, it's probably a Fibonacci number. This flower only has 7 petals, but 1 is missing, so that would be 8. That's a Fibonacci number. This flower just has 1 flower, but if you notice the sections, you'll see that there's 5. This is a hollyhock seed pods, and if you look carefully at the top of one, you can see there's 5 petals to encase the seeds, and I would bet the seeds in there are tightly packed, likely in a spiral, to represent the good parts of nature. In our bin, we have a cutting board, but you'll have to bring your own knife. I should have had that in the bring-ins. And you can bring some fruits from home. For example, an apple. If you cut it open, it should have a 5-star pattern. This one's kind of demolished, but... Then a tomato. I got a tomato, and it has, the stem has 5 petals on it. I'm also going to cut this one open. And it usually has 3 lobes, but this is not a good example. Normally 1, 2, 3, an aroma tomato. Pineapple would be a good thing to cut open and look at the spirals. Here's a banana. This has 3. So you can just talk to the kids about Fibonacci and how these sequences, we can find them in nature. If you have an old cottonwood tree out back, and you could find a dried up twig, inside the twig, if you break the twig, there will be a star-shaped pattern inside there, a 5-point pattern. This is okra. And if you could see the, oh, I got a seed there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think there's going to be 5 technical sections in there. It's probably hard to focus and to fit the Fibonacci sequence. So that kind of brings you through the whole outline for ELF for Center 3. Again, the Fibonacci stuff maybe seems kind of fancy, but it's a kind of a good introduction to kids to bring the math in with our science, since we do try to partner those 2 things. If you have any questions, you can contact us at mitchellelf@gmail.com. And again, please be sure and get the materials back into the case as you found it, so that the next class can run smoothly. One more thing I forgot. Not a big deal, and you probably won't have time, but we do have a couple books back here for Center 3. As with all our books, they're borrowed from the library, so take good care of them, but you might want to breeze through them first to see what would be of interest to your center and use them as a supplement. You could also use them for your introduction or conclusion. Thanks so much. We'll see you at ELF.